having these little planes fly over and drop a few bombs on Japan. In Europe, we had an airplane that would fly 600 miles. It could go out 300 miles, come back 300 miles. There was no place that we could fly from with those little bombers. They were little, but they were big. We needed a plane that would fly 1,250 miles and come back. And that was in June and July and August of 1944. The Marines took these islands, Saipan, Tinian, and Guam. Those are pretty good sized islands, so they got a lot of room for big aircraft, airports and stuff like that to fly from. Iwo Jima was halfway between that and Japan. They started flying from this place and bombing Japan in August, September of 1944. They found out that they were losing so many planes. They built a lot of these bombers. They built actually 3,700 and some of those B-29 bombers. They were losing the bombers so fast because when they get over Japan, Japanese don't like to have bombs falling on them. So they take anti-aircraft. They have airplanes that go up and try to shoot down the bombers. The bomber gets damaged. So when they're trying to get home now, they're flying at only about 200 plus miles an hour. So the trip home is another 6 hours after they've done their bombing. And so many of those planes were damaged so badly that they're crashing in the ocean, and we're losing the airplane, and we're losing actually the crew. A crew of 11 is dying, several of them every day, one day after day after day after day. They said, we've got to do something to create a safe place. So we arrived on February the 19th to secure this little tiny, tiny island. This island, this is Mount Suribachi. That's 545 feet tall. The island is 5 miles long. Right there, the narrowest part of the island, it's only 700 yards wide. That's 7 football fields wide. It's very, very narrow. It widens out finally to 2 miles wide, and it's shaped, if you're anywhere else in the United States, I'd say it would be shaped like a kite. But to you, because you're from Iowa, I'm telling you it's shaped like a pork chop. So we're going to land on this 2-mile long beach. And these little landing craft here are like this one over here. There's 18 men in each one of those. There's 2 guys manning 50 caliber machine guns. There's 1 guy up front that's actually piloting this thing. You notice the waves coming back? This mechanism on the side is like cups. It's pulling itself through the water, going about 12 miles an hour, top speed. And there's 380 of those going to land and hit the beach in 4 different waves. And the whole idea here is, if you're going to try to attack an enemy, it's just like if you guys were out in a snowball fight. If you were going to really try to overcome your enemy, your guys that are out there in some kind of little snow fort, you better get a whole bunch of guys lined up and all of you go throwing snowballs all at the same time. And that's exactly what happened here. But what they did, there was a general by the name of General Kiribayashi that was in charge of this whole thing. He said, let them come ashore, and then we're just going to at 10 o'clock, we went ashore from 9 o'clock till 9:25. We had 7,000 Marines on shore. And they're going to secure the beach, and guys like myself that were called in like reserve, it isn't really reserve, but it's the next guys to come in. We're going to supposedly win the next day. But instead, Kiribayashi had all of his artillery aimed at this beach, and each particular cannon just had an area about, again, looking at football fields. About the size of a football field, they had 300 and some cannons that at 10 o'clock in the morning, they all fired at the beach at the same time. Immediately, there's 600 and some Marines that are dead, almost just that fast. And there's another 1,800 of them that are wounded. Whoa, all of a sudden, there's 2,500 people of those 7,000 that are gone, they're out of commission. So that afternoon, I went ashore. And I'd have a lot of stories I could tell you, but that I haven't got time to do that today, but there's a lot of scary stuff that went on. I was shot at, I was buried, I had every opportunity to be killed just like a lot of other people were. But I was very, very fortunate, and so I survived. And when I talk about those 6 guys on the front line that I trained to be radio men in one of those line companies, I'm in headquarters of what you call a battalion. A battalion is 1,000 men. So we got 250, 250, 250, that's 750 on the front line, 250 back here in headquarters that are doing things like actually keeping records of everything, the medical people. We had other things that are going on, including us people like communicators. So one of those line companies, after 14 days, ran out of those 6 men. They were all either killed or wounded. So I went up, took place there for three days, and on March the 8th, I was off the front line as well as that company and then what was left of them. And because there's more that I can't tell you about because it's just too much detail. But that's my birthday. I was 20 years old. What a present. Unbelievable. But the minute I got off the front line, you're still being shot at. And in my particular case, I'm off. I find a cute little hole, a depression in the ground to get into so that maybe a rifleman wouldn't be able to pick me out, a sharpshooter. And the front line is that way, and all of a sudden I hear artillery shells coming in from the side. First one, then another, one short, one long. And the only guys that are out there is our own Navy. It was a destroyer that thought that the front line was here, but that was yesterday. He was working on the directions for yesterday's battle. And he forgot, somebody gave him misinformation. The front line now was out here, about 500 yards away. And so when the guys on the front didn't see that one bomb go off, they called for another. And when that one, they didn't see that one, they called for another. When they didn't see that one, they called for another. 5 shells lit around me. It could have just as well killed me as not. But finally, they called it off, and got the guy to start firing in the correct position. This is the kind of a landing craft that I went ashore on. And I went ashore that afternoon. There's the cannons firing at Mount Suribachi. Here's all of the guys hitting the sandy beach and trying to get up into position. This particular landing craft had a jeep on it, along with a bunch of Marines. That ship there is actually bringing tanks into the battle. You can see sunken ships. The beach became literally a junkyard. I mean, the enemy is hitting equipment and just turning it into unusable pieces of machinery. These are corpsmen down here. These are wounded people on the beach. Machine gun up there trying to work towards Suribachi. On the 4th day, the flag went up, and that's when you see this famous picture, which is now depicted in Washington, D.C. I hope someday through your life, it may not be for long years, many years from now, but I hope you all get to come to Washington and see not only what goes on where your place of government is, but to all of these monuments that are all over the place. So this is a great big giant statue depicting that very happening over there. I picked up a flag on Iwo Jima sometime in the future. I might have a chance to tell you how I saw that flag was returned to Japan. And that's part of the story that I have in my own personal life is the Japanese people. We had a lot of exchange students through the 1960s, the 1970s, even into the 80s. We had many, many Japanese people coming and going from Japan. We went, my wife and I went to Japan, and literally we have very many, many friends there. And they come and visit us and so forth. Those Japanese people helped me find, by reading this flag, as to who it really belonged to in the first place. Toshio Kawai was the man, the soldier's name. Toshio Kawai. B-29s started landing on March the 8th, and after about 12 days, March the 4th. It says so right there. How could I tell you something with it answers out of the page? There were 22,000 Japanese. We killed 21,800. The reason we had to kill 21,800 is because Japanese don't surrender. If it had been a different enemy, very likely they would have finally surrendered after about 4 or 5 days of battle. But their whole thing is, we do not. If we go into a battle, we are either going to win or we're going to die trying. And that's basically what happened. And I could go on and on. Here's a book that someday maybe one of you, see what that says on there? Say it out loud. What's the other words? A tomb called Iwo Jima. There are 21,000 Japanese that are dead all over that island. They don't know where they're at. They're in tunnels, they're in caves, they're in bunkers, they're perhaps blown all apart. But we go back there and celebrate the ending of that battle. And 2.5 years ago, on March the 14th of 2012, I went back to Iwo Jima. Did I poke a wrong button?